The broadcast is now starting. All
Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to Agent's Energy series of webinars. Today's topic is energy efficiency as a means to improve women's lives. My name is Ana Rojas, and it is my pleasure to be your moderator for today. I want to thank you, the participants, for joining in today, and also our panelists. We have an amazing group of 4 speakers lined up for today. We also want to thank USAID for their support to Agent and making this series, this webinar series, possible. Before we get started, I want to share with you a few housekeeping rules. So please bear with me for a couple of seconds while we go through them. As you have seen, the participants are being kept on mute, and this is to reduce disturbances. However, please do not take this as a signal for not joining. Quite the opposite. You will see that towards the right of your screen, you have a chat box. Do use it. Share with us your questions and your comments throughout the whole webinar so we can collect them and make use of them when we have our questions and answer session towards the end of the webinar. I also want to introduce you to my colleague Maria Preble, who's supporting us with all technical aspects of the webinar. So please do also reach out to her using the chat box if you have questions about the webinar or if you want to share something with us. You will see also that through the webinar, we will be making handouts available, again, using the chat box function. So do keep an eye on it so that you can keep on track with the information that is being shared. And finally, because this is the question that we get asked the most during the webinars, yes, we will record today's webinar, and the recording as well as the PDF versions of the presentations that you will see today will be uploaded to our website. So do stay tuned and give us a few hours before you go and click on the links and want to relive the webinar. So before we get started with today's presentation, I just want to share with you, for those of you who do not know us, that Agent is a 10-year program that was launched by USAID in 2014, and it is implemented by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN. Under the different pillars that it has, Agent has one very distinct one on energy, in which part of the initiative is to support the energy sector to be gender responsive by filling knowledge gaps, sharing best practices, encouraging documentation of experiences, and creating new knowledge. Hence, one of the reasons why we have this webinar series where we can dive into experiences and share with broader audiences. Today's webinar will try and address the questions that you see here, mainly how it is that gender considerations are related to energy efficiency and how this can be used to tracking progress toward the Sustainable Development Goals. Also, we will hear what kind of activities can be implemented to ensure energy efficiency actions at different levels can include gender perspective, and how women can actually be part and take action of energy efficiency initiatives, besides just being seen as consumers of energy products and services. And the way that we're gonna be running today's webinar is as follows. Of course, the introduction and welcome, which is now. And then we're gonna be followed by 4 different presentations, one on energy efficiency and evaluation of SDG progress by Ed Revine. Then followed by examples from Kyrgyzstan, from Jiří Zeman. A third presentation by Carol Mulholland on a project in Bangladesh, particularly on clean energy options. And finally, we will hear about the energy clinics experiences in Kerala, India by Dadashan Unitar. And after we hear from all our presenters, we will go into the questions and answers. If you want to learn more about Agent and the work we do, as well as the gender and renewable energy platform, the green platform, where you can find resources on different topics and cluster by countries and regions, please do reach out to us. And if you have further questions, you can see the emails and of my colleagues, Maria Preble, Jackie Siles, and myself. So do reach out to us if you have questions. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Edward Vine, who is an affiliate at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, where he was involved in the evaluation of energy efficiency programs and technology performance measurement for over 36 years. Dr. Vine contributed to the development of the California Public Utilities Commission Energy Efficiency Evaluation Protocols, the U.S. Department of Energy's Impact Evaluation Framework for Technology Deployment Programs, and the National Action Plan on Energy Efficiency Evaluation, Measurement, and Verification Guidelines. He has received several awards related to his work on evaluation, and in 2007, as a member of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, he received the Nobel Peace Prize. For the last 2 years, he has been working with colleagues in creating a community of evaluators in Asia, holding several evaluation workshops in Asia, and establishing the first conference in Asia on the evaluation of energy efficiency programs and policies. Ed, it's a pleasure to have you here with us, and please take the floor to share with us how gender relates to energy efficiency and SDG tracking.
Great. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk today on a topic that I really didn't have much experience in a few years ago, but I was able, through a project with the U.S. Department of Energy and APEC, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, where we delved into gender. And so each of the presenters doesn't have much time, but I'm going to go through these rather quickly, but you can then look at the slides, and actually there's a reference at the end of my talk where you can learn more about this. Let's see. So the topics I'm briefly going to go through are Sustainable Development Goals, and then what are the perspectives people take when they're looking at gender, and then what about energy efficiency and gender. And then as an evaluator, I've been making recommendations for evaluators when they're evaluating programs and policies and trying to include energy efficiency and gender, and then some concluding remarks. So just briefly, many of you probably know about the Sustainable Development Goals, but as a practitioner in the US, I really haven't been exposed to that too much. I know outside they have, but this was approved by the UN General Assembly in 2015 and underpins the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development that officially came into force in 2016. As you can see, there are 17 goals. 2 of them in particular, number 5 and number 7, are critical for today's talk. Number 5 says achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. And number 7, ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. And this is where energy efficiency falls in. It's a key component of number 7, and it contributes directly or indirectly to achieving all the other Sustainable Development Goals. Now, what about gender perspectives? How do people approach gender? Well, for today's talk, we're focusing on women, and you can also focus on men as well. And it also can mean more, but today I'm going to be talking from a sort of a woman perspective regarding gender. And then there's a social equity perspective, looking at what we call distributional impacts, not just one single impact, but how do impacts affect an array of different households, for example. And then for gender, it's not really looked at by itself, but it's included with other perspectives. For example, accounting for the intersection of gender with other social variables such as race, ethnicity, and caste. And then the literature in gender looks at it sort of from 2 perspectives. One from a northern perspective, the other is a developing country perspective, what we call the South perspective. And you'll be hearing more of the South perspective in today's talks. So equity-focused evaluation. In terms of social equity, we're focusing on who engages with a program, and then moves beyond a focus on outputs and what we normally look at when we evaluate a program. For example, how many people were served, towards a better understanding of who was actually served, age, gender, income, and so on, and where the program recipients belong in the continuum of need. Some people really need a lot of help with regard to energy bills or energy use or energy efficient appliances, and some don't need as much. So we need to look at that, what we call the distribution. And then the focus on inequities is different than the focus on effectiveness. And those familiar with evaluating programs and policies, we often look at one number, say a cost effectiveness number. Here we're looking again at the distribution of impacts and improvements. Well, what about energy efficiency? Well, the field of gender and energy is still emerging and evolving, and more people and organizations are looking into this. Some with rigorous research, others sort of from an implementation mode. Most of the focus has been on renewable energy. No surprise, that's the hot topic these days, solar and wind in particular, and fuels. But it is changing. There's more of a focus on electricity and how people are using electricity, and rather than just fuels. But very little attention has been paid to energy efficiency, and we hope we can change that. And as you noted, many organizations are becoming more interested and involved in this topic. I'm not going to go through all the list of these organizations, but there are a number of them. So that's a very good sign, and I hope maybe in a few years from now we'll have much more to say and much more progress in this topic. So currently, tendency for gender remains invisible and unacknowledged or marginalized in the energy efficiency world. And so, not that people are consciously trying to disparage it, but they're regarded as gender neutral. They're saying, oh, it's going to have the same effect in both, in this case, women and men. It's not discriminatory. But really, energy efficiency is not gender neutral. Women and men are able to contribute and benefit in different manners from these interventions. And the key sectors where this has been looked at is household energy management. We'll hear a little about that, food processing, and agriculture. And in household energy management, women do bear the brunt of relying on inefficient energy sources and technologies. So looking at women as a vulnerable part of the population. And then when you look at how they use biomass or charcoal or ag waste for cooking and heating, or the use of kerosene for lighting, there are a number of issues related to that, related to health, safety, and empowerment. So women do play a key role also in household energy use by making and influencing decisions about the use of appliances, when they occur, when they're turned on during the day or turned off, the purchases of energy-related goods and services, particularly how efficient or inefficient they are, the education and shape, of course, of children's future energy consumption habits. And there's lots of stories showing how children learn from their parents in using energy in the home. And indoor thermal comfort, what kind of thermostat settings are set, are windows open and closed. The other thing is women are more willing than men to make changes in how and what they consume. And so this is a good opportunity for future targeting of women in energy efficiency programs and policies, looking at them as what we call beneficiaries, but also more importantly, perhaps, or just as importantly, I should say, they can play a very active role as agents of change, and we'll hear more about that later today. So what do I do for recommendations for evaluators? I ensure that I recommend that the terms of reference when there are RFPs for evaluating programs or policies or projects, that the evaluation team requires a gender analysis. They should have the gender expertise. They should partner also with organizations with gender expertise, particularly for reviewing the evaluation plans and processes, as well as the final or draft reports. And then they should also monitor and evaluate changes in women's empowerment, productivity, income, health, and education, and find out what are the barriers to participation in project activities and programs and policies. And as we know, as an evaluator, there are always unexpected impacts, and in particular, what are those for women. And then they should develop evaluation frameworks that examine participation in policy and program design and implementation by gender, and then examine the impacts of such programs and adoption of technologies by gender. Now, we often use quantitative methods, statistical, collecting lots of utility data, but there's also a need for what we call close-up qualitative methods, and particularly for this topic, they're essential. You can observe participants in these programs, you can conduct qualitative interviews. Often people can ask the people to write diaries or to present life histories. So we have a better understanding why women in particular are able or not able to participate in these programs. So in conclusion, just want to say that the gendered aspects of energy and energy efficiency are often understudied. So there is a need for more rigorous empirical research, especially a lot of countries now are trying to develop these ambitious energy savings and emissions reduction goals, and that requires the adoption and use of energy efficiency technologies. And then there's a need, as I mentioned, for gender balance in the research teams. So the bottom line, the takeaway, if gender impacts are not evaluated, they're unlikely to be given any attention. Here's my contact information, which you can get later. And then, as I mentioned at the bottom of the slide, I gave an hour presentation on these topics at a previous sort of webinar workshop at Lawrence Berkeley Lab, and you can listen to that as well. So that's the end of mine. Well, good, right on time.
Yes, you did. I'm very surprised, and thanks a million for your presentation.
Sure.
It's been both very informative and succinct. I can imagine that our audience are going to start asking questions, particularly about this last announcement that you make about the webinar and the tools. I thought it was really interesting how you were bringing on the tools of how to address gender into evaluation. So with that announcement, also an encouragement to you to start sending questions, I want to now move on to our second speaker. Jiří Zeman has more than 25 years of experience in energy efficiency and renewable energy consulting. He has developed energy efficiency and renewable energy policy regulations and investment level projects for financing and implementation. After working for the Czech not-for-profit Energy Efficiency Center since 2009, he works as a freelancer on development projects in Europe, Asia, and Africa. Jiří also serves as an evaluator and has performed 18 UNDP GEF project evaluations. Jiří has extensive experience working in Central Asia, including Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. And today he's going to take us to Kyrgyzstan in particular. So I see you're all set. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. And greetings to everybody. I've prepared a presentation on how integrating gender analysis into projects and improve results on an example of a project in Kyrgyzstan improving energy efficiency in buildings. So why does gender analysis matter in energy efficiency and renewable energy projects? We need to understand who are the real decision makers at all levels, not only at the macro level, at the governmental level, central governmental level, but also at the level of local communities and especially families, if the project is targeting households. So we need to understand institutional arrangements, but also the specific gender roles in that particular society. The gender roles differ country by country and even within countries. Especially, it might be different in urban areas and rural areas. And the most important to understand gender roles is when working or addressing households or families in energy efficiency or also in other subjects. This is where where we need to understand who specifically is the decision maker or opinion maker on the household level. Few words about Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan is a very beautiful country with lots of mountains. It is the second poorest in the region of Central Asia. It has very little industry, but it is the only parliamentary democracy in Central Asia, and it has relatively well-developed civic society. It is a traditional patriarchal society, especially in rural areas, but it is combined also from the Soviet history with the influence and the establishment of emancipated women who have two roles as mothers in the families and also as a workforce in economy. And in Kyrgyzstan, there is one special important factor. There is a quite large labor migration when men migrate for work, typically to Russia for extensive periods of year. So some households are led by women, even in rural areas, even in case it is a traditional patriarchal setup. The UNDP GEF project, improving energy efficiency in buildings, objective was to reduce greenhouse gas emissions or energy consumption. The key component of the project was to develop new code on energy efficiency in buildings, energy performance of building code, and to increase the enforcement level of such a code. There were other activities also, construction of a pilot project. A new school was designed and constructed in Osh, in the second largest city. And there were lots of activities on trainings and on the promotion of best practices in energy efficiency in building design. And of course, there was also monitoring of results of achievements. So there were lots of activities focusing on training of experts and disseminating information on energy efficiency to general public as well. This project was a good example of integrating gender analysis into a project cycle. This is the requirement of all UNDP projects. The gender aspect should be analyzed and included into the project design, as well as in project evaluation. So at the beginning of project implementation, the gender analysis has been performed, and you can read the findings of this analysis. Women, together with children, elderly, tend to be more affected by energy efficiency because they tend to spend more time in buildings at homes. There was a low awareness of energy efficiency and on potential impacts on health, education, financial impacts. There was very low involvement of women in decision making related to energy efficiency, and the impacts were more significant in rural areas. So to address these gender gaps, the project was designed, or the project implementation focused on capacity development and targeted women also. About 40% of trained experts, of trained technicians were women. And women groups, women associations and NGOs were also used for dissemination of information, awareness raising, and knowledge transfer to general public. Maybe the most surprising aspect of this project regarding gender for me was that all key persons who were involved in implementing of this project were women, were ladies. The project manager, very energetic lady with excellent negotiation skills, with very great drive. The head of the local consulting organization, which is implementing financial facilities financed by EBRD, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, in focusing on energy efficiency in buildings in Kyrgyzstan. The head of the local NGO focused on energy efficiency, and also heads of departments at the Ministry of Energy and at the state agency on architecture and construction. They all were ladies. The top senior management at the Ministry of Energy, the minister, his deputy, and the head of the state agency, they were men, but they were not involved in project implementation on a daily level. And so all key persons involved on successful project implementation on a daily level in Kyrgyzstan in this project were women, and it is in the country which is traditional split of roles, which is traditional patriarchal country and Muslim country led typically by men. So to summarize, in Kyrgyzstan and in countries in this region, the gender agenda is led by donors. It's not driven by local entities. And energy efficiency projects are not designed to change local cultures or gender roles, but the gender analysis is integrated into at least these UNDP implemented and GEF-financed projects, both at the design phase, implementation, and at the evaluation. But it is important to to address the gender issues, because we need to understand who are the target audience, who are the real decision makers, and who are the users of energy efficiency appliances or buildings, who are the people who make the decisions, especially on the family or household level or local communities. And often, even in these traditional patriarchal societies, it is often women who have their say, who influence or make the decisions on energy efficiency or even renewable energy, especially in the residential sector in rural areas. And with this, I would like to conclude, and I would be happy to answer any questions if you will have in the discussion, if I will know the answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jiří. And I do think we're getting questions for you, so get prepared for the Q&A session. But it's been lovely to hear about this experience, and particularly your reflections on how this was all possible, because there was a call for addressing gender since the design of the project. I do think that is very strong in terms of how projects progress forward. With that little note, I want to move now to our third speaker, Ms. Carol Mulholland, who is a specialist, a master at Deloitte Consulting LLP, where she works on projects for USAID and other donors. Ms. Mulholland has more than 25 years of experience in the design, implementation, management, and evaluation of energy sector programs, both in developing countries and in the United States. She has worked with a wide range of energy sector stakeholders to design energy sector programs, policies, and training programs, and to evaluate energy programs' effectiveness. She currently manages the USAID-funded India Rise project, which is working to increase renewable energy penetration in India's grid. Carol, the floor is yours. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much. I am very much looking forward to sharing our experience with a project in Bangladesh. I am going to begin the presentation with a video that will provide a brief overview of the specific aspect of the project about which I'm going to speak, which is our work with clean cook stoves. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about the project that you just saw highlighted in the video. The project, oh, apologies for that, which is USAID's Catalyzing Clean Energy in Bangladesh, basically supported creating improved cook stoves in Bangladesh. The project focused on a wide variety of things, but what I'm talking about today and what had the greatest impact on women in Bangladesh were the improved cook stoves. Essentially, our project established a domestic market for an improved cook stove, which you see below, that was much cleaner. We created a sustainable business model to engage women in rural areas to sell the cook stoves and also to take the lead in educating communities about their benefits. Again, you saw in the video how it was another woman, the friend of the woman featured in the video, who actually told her about the cook stove and presented it to her. The smaller cook stoves come in there are basically several different kinds of them. There is the metal-bodied cook stove, which our project supported development from the very beginning and trained the local manufacturers who are now creating these cook stoves. We trained them both on the manufacturing, we helped them develop business plans, we helped them develop marketing materials, an example of which you see to the right of your screen. And then we trained essentially the women who are now marketing these cook stoves to other women. The second aspect of the project on which we worked was to work with a local development organization called IDCOL that promotes the cement cook stoves that are installed permanently in a home. And we worked with IDCOL to increase the efficiency of the cement cook stoves that they were building into the home, so that they are now 3 times more efficient than they were basically when the project started 3 years ago. So increasing essentially the number of improved cook stoves throughout Bangladesh, where women are primarily responsible for the cooking, and which is, as Jiří was mentioning, for Kyrgyzstan, a heavily patriarchal society with very traditional gender roles. The results of this project are that the improved cook stoves have improved indoor air quality, reduced CO2 emissions, reduced the costs and stresses on local wood stocks, which has a larger environmental benefit as well, and are helping to stimulate the local economy. During the time the project was operational, over 325,000 of these improved cook stoves were installed. And the average family in Bangladesh has 5 to 7 people. So if you do the math, that's quite a large number of people who are affected. The project reduced 666,000 metric tons of CO2, again, just through the cook stoves. And the energy savings affiliated with these 327,000 cook stoves is about 18 million gigajoules. We also trained over 7,000 people on the energy efficiency and business practices. The results, as you saw, are better conditions for cooking and preparing food, a reduction in the negative health impacts associated with the pollution, and increased literacy and understanding of the environment through the training workshops we ran. Again, this was something we focused on as a benefit for these stoves. And finally, increased career opportunities for women, because women are the ones marketing these stoves and very engaged in their sale. That is the end of the presentation. I will be more than happy to address any questions you may have at the end of the webinar. Thank you.
And thank you, Carol, for the presentation. I think that the video was extremely useful for understanding the context, and very nice also to see how it's women not only as users, but also as part of the value chain. So thanks for sharing the experience with us. I do want to remind our participants to keep on sending your questions, the questions that you have for our speakers, over the chat box. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our final speaker of the day. Sri Dadashan Unitan is an electrical engineer with a post-graduation in business administration and has more than 25 years of experience working in energy efficiency. Currently, he heads the Energy Management Center, the state-designated agency of Bureau of Energy Efficiency, the Small Hydro Promotion Cell of Power Development at the Energy Management Center in Kerala for the government of Kerala, and the UNDIO Regional Center, I guess it's UNIDO, for small hydropower. He participates in various committees, including the Kerala State Electricity Regulatory Commission, the State Planning Board, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, and the Agency for Non-Conventional Energy and Renewable Technology. Dareshan has presented technical papers at various international fora and received his training in the United States, Germany, China, and Japan. The Energy Management Center is the first state-level organization in India for energy efficiency, established in 1996, well before the Energy Conservation Act of 2001. And Dareshan, it's a pleasure to have you with us today, and we very much look forward to hearing and learning about the energy clinics.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Yes, Energy Clinic is a 100% women-oriented energy conservation program. Why we choose energy, women in energy? The notable factor in the cultural background of Indian homes is that women are the managers of energy, water, and sanitation. When we take the critical factor in Kerala, the domestic sector in Kerala alone consumes more than 51% of electricity. And the women population in the state also something around 400 men, it's around 102 women. So women plays a significant role as gatherers, users, and decision makers of household energy. The appropriate application of sustainable energy technologies has great potential for empowering women, enhancing their capacity to meet their family basic needs. The Energy Clinic we started in 1997. EMC has worked on an innovative program of promoting energy efficiency and energy conservation in homes through Energy Clinic. Energy Clinic is a program of energy conservation activities in the domestic sector through women as agents of change for creating energy conservation awareness among housewives. Energy Clinic program carried out by selected Energy Clinic volunteers. The main objectives of Energy Clinics are to spread awareness of basic concepts of energy efficiency and energy conservation in households, to share information on various clean energy technologies, applications, and services with women, to equip women to make informed purchase and wise use of equipments in homes, to create revenue opportunities for women through retail of clean energy products and appliances. Studies have concluded that at least 15% of energy saving can be achieved at the household level through awareness programs targeted at women. We started with the energy conservation classes conducted by the Energy Clinic volunteers, and also the promotion of Urja 2 thermal cookers, which I will brief later. Then when the situation has changed and more television and other communicative equipments came in the domestic sector, we changed the type of classes to surveys and visiting homes in the block level regions. Now we are planning the clinic surveys, and there are so many women-run entrepreneurships in Kerala. So we want to promote energy efficiency along with the homes to their workplace and conservation technology for implementation. This is an example of how a women energy clinic volunteer takes classes in a selected home, where the selected clinic animates what we call these people. The energy clinic is volunteers now named as clinic animators. Organizes demonstration classes on energy conservation in their own villages. The program attracts a large number of people, including housewives, teachers, local administrators, etc. And many have started practicing energy conservation by adopting and using energy efficient equipments. how will we select the, how will we train the energy clinic animators? Normally, we have one-day orientation program in the district level. Then selected energy clinic animators will be called for a 2-day residential training program at Energy Management Center at Trivandrum. Then we inform them what are the ways to conserve energy. Then they have to start the monthly energy clinic surveys. December 14, we have the National Energy Conservation Day. In association with the National Energy Conservation Day, we conduct special training programs. And in all the block, we conduct energy conservation awareness, and it's skit by women. So they perform along with the training programs and the demonstration. We conduct dramas and skits by women. At present, around 700 volunteers working in this program in the state of Kerala. So how will you select the energy clinic animators? So they should be socially committed women who can be energy conservation animators, are selected in association with leading women groups, women self-help groups, and prominent NGOs in the concerned districts. They are given initial training by the expert faculty of EMC at the district level and will conduct a sample field study to demonstrate how they can promote the energy efficiency program. Those who complete the first phase training will be called for a 2-day residential training at EMC, where they will be given effective training. All the expenses of the training will be borne by EMC. These trained women, who are nominated as energy conservation animators, organizes energy clinic in their locality, ensuring rural women participation. The animators conduct survey in homes in their locality terms as units. So one unit comprises of 20 houses in a month and spread awareness on energy conservation and demonstrate how to achieve energy conservation in homes. With the support USAID under South Asia Regional Initiative for Energy Program, we started a center called WISER, Women Institute for Sustainable Energy Research for SAARC countries, for educating women in energy conservation during 2010 and successfully ran for 3 years. Now EMC is planning to revise this program for other states in India. I have mentioned about a thermal cooker because the staple food of the Kerala people is rice, and we use boiled rice, which normally take 90 to 100 minutes for cooking. So this Urja 2 is a thermal container developed by the energy animators so that they can sell this product to the local households. So this thermal cooker can save nearly 70% of energy. So we want only 15 minutes of time for cooking the rice. The other time we keep the boiled rice and the pot in the thermal container. So it cooks its own. It is easy to make with the locally available materials. Normally cooking rice takes 1 hour. By using this boiled rice with water in the pot can be placed in the container so that it cooks its own with the heat contained in the water and the rice. So these are the programs, the training programs, and how we give training to the renewable energy equipments and how they can use solar hot water system for cooking in their small industries. So that's all about the energy clinic program of Energy Management Center. You can reach me in kmdunitan@hotmail.com or +91 9 4470 64618. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Darashan, and both for a great presentation and keeping on time. I was just reflecting about the fact that we've never had 4 panelists, all for being able to so succinctly share their presentations. So I guess it has to do something with the efficiency and the topic of today. Before we move, or now that we're moving to the Q&A session, I would like to encourage again our participants to continue sending their comments and questions. Ed, I'm going to start with you, as you were our first speaker of today. And I have one question in terms of women's empowerment, and that is, how are you measuring, or I guess, are you measuring women's empowerment when you're doing this energy efficiency programs and when you're training people who are doing monitoring and evaluation of energy projects?
Right. Well, as you can imagine, there's probably been less work on the empowerment issue, more work on, for example, energy savings, or even now there's a lot more interest in health aspects and measuring emissions or reductions of emissions, as we heard earlier with, say, cook stoves. That's an important part. The data that I've seen in terms of empowerment goes back to saving of money. So one of the things one could do is how much money is being saved and how that money is being used. We've heard in some cases where people have been actually able to develop their own little, say, job where they then accumulate more money. The job could be just their own, they're self-employed, or they're able to have more time to work on other ventures with other people as well. So that's, I guess, probably the best example where people, women in particular, are more empowered to use the money to do what they would like, and also to get more money, and then from that, from more income, they can do more things with that, either for themselves or, more importantly, for their family and their children.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So if I understand you correctly, it's more the economic empowerment of women that is perhaps easier to track at the moment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And Jiří, I want to ask you, I'm going to combine 2 questions because one is very, very specific, and I'm not sure if you have the data available. So I'm going to read them to you. The first question is, in your presentation, you said 60% of women respondents to the survey had never heard of energy efficient buildings in Kyrgyzstan. Do you have information of the percentage of men who had actually never heard about energy efficiency in buildings? Is there a difference? Do you remember?
Well, I'm sorry, I do not remember these data. I've made evaluation of this project. I haven't done this gender analysis study, so I'm sorry, I do not remember by heart these numbers. But this was a new topic in Kyrgyzstan, so I assume the awareness in general was low about on energy efficiency, perhaps a little bit lower. My guess was with women, but I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you. Apologies for putting you on the spot. And then the next question, I guess you could answer it also relying on your experience in the region. But it says, very interesting that so many key positions in energy efficiency implementation in Kyrgyzstan are occupied by women. Considering the general patriarchal culture that you mentioned, to what do you attribute this strong participation of women?
I think it was not it was because they were great leaders. not necessarily because of preferences giving to women. They were just very very skilled, very professional, very enthusiastic, and very dynamic persons. Especially the project manager, the lady from the consulting group, from the private sector, and from the NGO. So it depends on the personality also of each, not on sex only.
Yeah, no, I understand, but it was, as you said, it was very surprising to see that there was this level of high level powerful women, and it does strike, it does call for perhaps a reflection. And I'm wondering if, I know this was atypical, and that's why it caught so much your eye. But when you think about the region in which you've worked, do you tend to see more women perhaps working in the energy sector or engaged in engineering fields than if, let's say, you're working on or evaluating projects in Africa or Asia?
So I think what is specific in this region is the Soviet history. When during the Soviet time, the traditional organization of the society was kind of reduced. So the history or examples of strong women leadership as a tradition, even in Kyrgyzstan, in a kind of traditional country. So this was not new in Kyrgyzstan with this project only, but I think there are examples from other projects and from the history as well. There are well-educated women with very good professional history. So I think it's a combination of these factors primarily.
Okay, thank you. Carol, I'm going to move to you in terms of the questions. And I want to start with a number question. In your slides, you were saying that a little bit over 7,000 people were trained in Bangladesh. And a typical question in that sense is, do you recall or do you have available information of how many of those were women and how many of those were men?
I do have those numbers, although not off the top of my head. I can certainly find them. We trained quite a large number of women, basically because we did quite a lot of marketing training, marketing and outreach.
Okay, so sorry, I interrupted you.
No, please go ahead.
So as go ahead.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say that because a chunk of the work we were doing focused on the marketing and outreach, we trained quite a large number of women. We trained, actually, I'm looking at this, we trained about 5,000.
Okay, so that's about 2/3.
Yes,
give or take.
Correct. That's correct.
That's quite interesting. It's quite a big number. I also have a question for you regarding the business model of your project, and I guess it's not a surprise that our participants are interested in learning more about the business model that you've used for rolling out disimproved stoves and how you engaged women in that sense.
So very quickly, one of the things we realized is that if we were going to reach women as the target population, then we needed to have someone who could talk to them in a way that they found very relatable. And since women are the primary users of these stoves, it made sense to target them essentially by engaging women to market the stoves. And so as we were working with the nascent manufacturers to develop the prototype stoves, we spoke to them about the business model and how to engage them around putting together a successful outreach and marketing campaign. That actually was a tremendous focus of our work because we wanted to ensure that this would be sustainable once the project ended, as it did last fall. So in order to do that and to reach the right targets, we suggested that they look at this kind of a model. And while many of the companies have men as primary owners, women are very actively engaged.
Thank you. Thank you. I do understand, and yeah, it's quite interesting to see how in that sort of intervention, women tend to have this active role, particularly as market as sales agents. So again, very interesting to see how the model is applied in Bangladesh. Darishan, I wanted to go to you now with a question, because you were discussing quite a lot about the involvement of women through the centers and increasing their awareness. But the question that we have here is, if through that engagement with women, have you also engaged, or have you had the possibility of using their feedback and expertise in terms of innovation of products or identification of technologies that could be more energy efficiency and therefore also more appropriate to these women's lives?
Yes. Normally, the energy clinic animators explain all the energy efficiency program in money terms. Suppose you are using a 1-star refrigerator and a 5-star refrigerator. They will tell how much Indian rupee you can save through the electricity bills. And penetration of energy efficient equipments is very high in the state of Kerala.
Okay, and now when you are you considering, or how are you?
Now,
Yep, go ahead.
Next stage is, there are so many women-run small and medium, along with micro enterprises are there. And in that, there are some of them are using energy inefficient models. So now we are planning to conduct training programs to educate these people that how much energy you are going to lose when you are using the inefficient motor with an energy efficient motor. And one thing, and another one is, we are discussing with the financial institutions to provide a low interest loan for these groups. Maybe the typical interest rate is something around 9.5, whereas for energy efficiency program, some of the government supported financial institutions gives at 6% interest. So we are now targeting these group also. Another best thing what we have seen through this program is, when the women or the housewife understand the energy efficiency, they teach the children so that how we can save energy and how much the carbon emission we can reduce. That's the way most of the people are now thinking, because we are using quite high percentage of thermal energy content, and now the renewable energy is picking up in a big way. So once the students and the housewife knows all these things, it's one of the best thing what we can do for the future generations.
Okay, thank you. Listening to Darishan and actually to all the other 3 presenters, I am sure I'm biased, but I hear all presentations one way or the other linked to emission reductions and CO2 reductions. and credits. And I'm very much tempted, and I think I'm just going to take my prerogative and ask all four of you to share if you have already explored ways of crediting these emissions, and to what extent are these creditors looking also for a gender angle to your projects, or if they're willing to pay a premium to your projects. So, Darshan, I don't know if you have experience with this.
Once again, tell me.
If you have experiences like going to, there are different credits, certificate institutions. Yes, so they would evaluate your emission reductions, and they'll give you, you know, like a bond, a credit for it. And there are a few that are also interested in, you know, quantifying the co-benefits of the projects. And I'm very much interested in hearing the experience of you four speakers, because you have different hats. To what extent you have seen a request from this certification agencies in terms of understanding co-benefits and the impacts of gender equality of these projects?
No, actually, we did a very big CDM-based program in 2009-10, where we replaced 12.5 million incandescent lamps with CFLs. And the program was registered in UNFCCC, and the total CO2 reduction was something around 1 million tons of CO2.
Okay, thanks. And the tons, when they were evaluated, was there any reference also to the gender implications of it, or was just the credits were just giving on the emission reductions?
Yeah, it is already registered, and they have given the certificate numbers. And since there is no value for the CERs, we are still keeping that.
I understand. I understand. Carol, I want to follow up with you, if that's okay. Also on this intersection between emission reductions, obtaining credits for those emissions, and making the link with co-benefits, including gender equality. I wonder if you, through this project or other experiences from Deloitte, if there is something that you want to reflect on at the moment on these topics.
A lot of the work we're doing definitely focuses on the gender piece. We have not been pursuing the credits actively, since many of our projects are USAID funded projects. Any credits would reflect back to the agency. And that, as I said, that hasn't been something that we have been looking at actively as a component of the project at this time.
I understand. Okay. Well, I have you here, but I do have a question from our audience, also related to the credits. And basically the question is, if you could share with us who is the certifier of the carbon credits that you have, and to what extent or how many years are the stopes monitored to determine the adoption rates over the time and at the stope age. I'm not sure if you have that information at hand.
I do not have that information at hand. We use a system that USAID has put in place where essentially we enter information about the stoves. I believe they have a 10-year lifetime. And we enter that information, and then this program that USAID has developed that's used across the agency then calculates the emissions reductions associated with each activity. So for example, if we were working on a different energy efficiency activities, such as industrial energy efficiency, which also was a component of this larger catalyzing clean energy in Bangladesh project. Then we would enter the various energy efficiency measures that were installed in industry, their assessed lifetimes, and again, that would provide us with an estimate of the greenhouse gas emissions reductions.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Thank you. I did not know that there was a special program from USAID to make this calculation. So there you go. We're gonna start looking for it, I'm sure. Jiří, I know you are not a project developer, but that you evaluate projects. And I'm wondering is through your experience evaluating UNDP projects, but also GAF projects, on this interlink between emissions reductions, energy efficiency, if you have seen a shift one way or the other in terms of not only assessing the emissions that are reduced, but trying to understand the other benefits that are generated through this reduction in emissions, and in that sense, if you're seeing a take-up or not on attention to gender equality and women's empowerment.
I would say that the projects which are subject to carbon finance, which sell their emission savings to earn financial revenues to pay for the investment, they are focused on the tons of greenhouse gas emission reductions, and not necessarily on other benefits of the project. But the project I have mentioned, or typically the UNDP GEF finance projects, are focused on developing on new opportunities, on developing long-term impact, opening up the market. So also the greenhouse gas emissions are the main target. There are other factors which and project impacts which are also important, maybe as much as the greenhouse gas emission reductions. So I think it's difference between the development projects and kind of commercial projects which use carbon finance as a form of financing.
Okay, thank you. Ed, how do you contextualize the whole conversation we're having right now when evaluating not only energy efficiency, but also evaluating the targets toward SDG 5 on gender equality and women's empowerment? Have you had experience with credit developers, but also what could you gain from interacting with them and bringing part of the conversation up today to this other sector? I'm just asking for a couple of reflections from your side.
Yeah, it's a good question, and to be honest, from this perspective on the gender, I haven't really seen much work in that area. Now, there's, as you will probably well know, that there has been a good history of energy efficiency projects and crediting, particularly with the Clean Development Mechanism, the CDM, that's been going on, and as well as with in the European context where there's been crediting. But the gender aspect, as I said, it hasn't really reached or received, I should say, much attention. And I go back to my earlier slides. When you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, I see that more of a better mechanism where you're trying to link, in this case, gender, energy efficiency, reduction in emissions, climate change, health, etc. I see that as a very good vehicle for getting these integrated. How the carbon creditors get involved, they may just be interested in one aspect of that, but then it depends what you're trying to achieve. And carbon creditors, you may not need to get them involved. If you want to get them involved for, a stream of revenue, there may be other organizations outside of the carbon crediting that might provide funds to reach their goals. So it's a tricky issue. I guess one of the other things I learned, particularly in my work in Asia for the last few years, is people are interested in reducing emissions, but less for climate change, except for a few instances, but more for urban and rural air quality. You've seen good pictures, I'm sure everyone has seen them, of cities that are covered with smog, and in China and as well as India, there have been good examples where people have been told not to go to work, stay home for their own health. And that, again, opens up to a number of issues in terms of productivity, income, and so on. And so that's where I see the integration occurring, less on the climate change and crediting and more on the sustainable development goals.
Thank you. And listening to you, I'm also tempted to put another question. It's a spin-off of a question we've received for you, the speakers, in terms of the role of men in energy efficiency, because we've been concentrating a lot on women today. But what about men? And are we targeting them also? And if so, why? And the reason behind this question being expanded, not targeted to one of you, the speakers, comes basically from an experience in Mexico, which I understand GIZ conducted, a survey to understand who was being the least efficient in terms of use of energy, and it was teenage boys, basically because of the time that they were investing in gaming and watching TV and other issues. So on one hand, today we've been dedicating a lot of attention to women and how women could change habits at home, but also there are other groups. And Ed, you were talking about the need of, evaluating not only in terms of sex segregated data, but also collecting data in terms of age. And I'm wondering, again, asking you, and then I'm going to go through the other speakers, what are your reflections in terms of how do we engage women and men differently in our projects and in our experiences?
Well, that's a good, we could spend a long time on this one.
Let's keep it short.
Yeah, I would say from my perspective, the focus on women in genders mainly because of the vulnerability aspect of women compared to men. And I think, and with good reason, there's good evidence to show that both inside and outside the home, there's a need to address the needs of women rather than men. Traditionally, so that's part one. Part two, just from my own experience since 1980, we'll say, and my work in the US, when I first started my meetings, my conferences, etc., I would say they're 99% men. Very few women were involved. If you fast forward today, I would say easily in any of the meetings I go to, conferences and so on, people working, consulting firms in particular, there's at least over 50% of the people there are women. So this has been sort of gaining traction, as it were, and I expect it will continue. Where are the men going? I don't know, but it is interesting that, I think at the end of the day, what we need to do is raise the issue of gender in all the contexts, all the forums where men are as well. Focus, still think on the women. Raising the men as an issue, I don't see that as a good use of resources right now, unless there's an identifiable group So if it's people or kids, children focusing on computers, I think it's true for men as well, women as well as men. So I don't really see that need.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to see how the context is changing and how women are becoming more and more a part of the decision making also in the energy sector from your reflection. Jiří, I also want to ask you if you want to comment or reflect on this particular angle of whether or not through your work and your evaluations you've spotted the differences in which women and men may react to the projects that you're evaluating.
Well, it depends on the local culture. Maybe the most a case of from Tajikistan, where I evaluated a project focused on small hydropower in rural areas. It's very interesting. It's much more traditional society in those rural areas. Men do not shake hands. I couldn't see. We were visiting some households. I couldn't see the women, only the men there. But it is the women, as Carol described, who spend most of the time cooking in their households using the wood smoke. They spend most of the time in the smoke areas, and they often also have opportunities to influence the decision or even to make the decision. So it's it depends on the background, on the local culture, and the split of the gender roles in each situation. I was working also in Seychelles on similar projects, and Seychelles is a matriarchal society. It's I would say it's a Jamaica in Africa, and the women have traditional role as the leaders of the household, who make the decisions. So then it's the situation is almost vice versa compared to Central Asia.
Okay. Thank you very much for those reflections. Carol, you're next in line. So the question to you is, how, if we're thinking about the Bangladesh project that you're presenting and sharing with us today so kindly, how are men and women being targeted differently in the project? What kind of reflections and what kind of activities can you think of that were maybe different to women and men?
I think since men tend to be the primary economic earners, that the targeting for them is going to be more around saving money. The targeting for women would address saving money, saving time, cleaning up inside the air quality inside the house, and I mean very much around freeing up their time to do other things with their families, as well as, quite frankly, having a more modern appliance. But essentially, part of what we do is a little bit of research to find out what are the issues that people care the most about, and then try to target accordingly.
Okay, thank you. It's very interesting what you're saying and how often you see projects that do not invest in that, knowing what's the need of your target audience. So very glad to hear that what you're doing and learning from it. Dareshan, you're last in that question, and I know that the clinics seem to be run entirely by women. But I'm wondering if through the project and the information sharing, how, if you approach men too, and if you do, how?
In the households, women are managing most of the cooking energy needs and lighting and other equipments. So we are targeting men for other programs. Normally, why we are not taking that much care for men, because they are not much concerned about the savings. So after coming from the office, they want comforts. Whereas the women, they actually calculate how much savings can be made through energy conservation, as well as how much savings can be, how we can reduce the pollution. So we have to target these two, but in the domestic sector, we have to give more priority to the women. So we call women as the energy managers of hope.
Okay. That is clear and interesting too to see. I mean, that they are how the role of women still as household managers means that they are the entry point for household energy management too. As I am conscious of the time and the fact that we need to wrap up for today, I want to ask each of you to give us a takeaway message and direction. As you are already online, perhaps you can share with us 1-2 sentences of what is the main idea that you want our audience to take with after this webinar.
As all the speakers mentioned, we have to save and protect the earth. The climate change happened after the Industrial Revolution and after the fossil fuel combustion. So there are so many generations to come in this planet. So wherever we see inefficient use of energy, we have to be the ambassadors for promoting energy efficiency in all these sectors, whether it is domestic, whether it is industry, commercial, or any sector. We have to promote energy efficiency. So wherever conservation fails, pollution starts.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Carol, if I could invite you to share with us your takeaway message in terms of the project and how it contributes to gender equality.
I'll be happy to. I think that working with the private sector is critical for long-term sustainability. And that is one thing I would definitely emphasize. The other thing is that it's very important to engage women at all levels, as owners and producers, and as distributors, as well as consumers. And that is one of the main keys to ensure long-term success.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Jiří, if I could call you also and ask you to share your takeaway message from us in terms of the links of gender and energy efficiency.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that integrating gender analysis into energy efficiency projects is not important because it is promoted by the international donor organization, but because when we develop, design, or implement any project, we need to understand exactly whom to address, who are the decision makers we want to address, who are the users. And it can, the gender roles can have big effect on the actual decision or opinion makers at the local community level or at the household level. So we need to understand the gender roles, the gender aspects in each society to be able to design and implement effectively any project.
Thank you. Indeed, efficiency and understanding of target audience, but also benefits production is one of the key elements for projects. So I'm 100% agreeing with you on that one. Ed, if you could share your final thoughts with us.
Sure. I don't want to be repetitive or redundant, so second all of what's been said by the other presenters. I would just add, as an evaluator, we're going to have lots of different energy efficiency programs and policies at the local, state, country, national, international levels. And I think it's critical that there's an evaluation component in part of that. When a lot of focus is on design and implementation, we need to make sure there's some funding for evaluating to see how we can improve these programs and policies. And as part of the evaluation process, we really need to encourage looking at the gender issues related to energy efficiency. And I think if that's sort of embedded from the beginning of a project, when you're designing and implementing, you have that as part of that, the design and implementers will be more aware of the gender issues as well, and not just wait till it needs to be evaluated.
Thank you. I guess I agree with you too. So I think this brings us to the close of our webinar. I want to thank our speakers for their great presentations and their insights. It's been an amazing and a very interesting conversation we've had today. And of course, also all those of you who've tuned in and joined us for today's webinar. I want to invite you also to our next our upcoming webinars. We have one next week, Thursday. I believe the link and information has been shared with us, over the chat box. That one in particular is going to be about improved cook stoves in Latin America. The webinar is in Spanish, so if you want to, Spanish is your native tongue, or you want to brush your language skills, do join us. And our next English webinar on Agent will be towards the end of May. So stay tuned for more information on the topic and the specifics of the time and date for that webinar. Again, thanks to all of you and to USAID for their support in making this series and Agent possible. And do give us a few hours so we can transform today's webinar into a recording that can be uploaded to our website together with the PDF versions of the presentation you've seen today. You'll be receiving an automated email with the information when it's up, and we hope you've enjoyed today. And if you have questions for us or the panelists, do feel free to reach out. Thank you very much, and wishing you a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.